Welcome everyone. This is Michael from the Marks Group Live. Excited to be here today teaching admin class module and field customization to you. And I've got echo, so give me a moment to get rid of that echo. Okay, give me a moment, please. Welcome everyone. This is Michael from the Marks Group Live. Excited to be here today teaching admin class module and field customization part 1 to you live and in person. Today we're going to cover the following. Let's see, there we are. We're going to look at access module and field customization options. We're going to create a custom module and set its permissions. We're going to look at how you can organize your modules, create a tab group, and create web tabs. And we're going to create a layout for a module. And finally, we're going to take a quick overview of sections. This is a two-part class. In tomorrow's session, I'll be expanding on and extending the work that we are starting today. We're going to spend about 45 to 60 minutes going over the classwork, and then I'll open the last 45 to 60 minutes for a chat discussion where I can answer any of the questions that you may provide in the chat window that you'll see on the right-hand side of your screen, somewhere around there. If you're viewing this on a mobile device, there should be a chat window there available as well. I think it's underneath the video. And I please ask you to place all of your questions during our class today in that chat window. Whether you're on mobile or desktop, that chat window will close a few minutes after the class is over, but I do encourage you to continue asking questions for clarity on our main web page, where you'll see a chat option on every page. Just mention that you're asking a question regarding a class topic, and one of our trainers will be happy to help you out. If you're having resolution or speed issues, please click on one of the two icons at the bottom right corner of your video window. The one on the right is used to make your video full screen, and the gear or the cog can be used to adjust the video size. We recommend leaving that on auto, but you can change it downward if you need to in order to accommodate your internet speed. Also, feel free to download and follow along with our class documentation. It's not a manual, but it is a nice way to follow along as well as being a good reference after the class. Go ahead and scroll down just a little bit on your screen and you should see the download link. If it is not there and you'd like it, that means that we are still in the process of writing it, and please do get in touch either in the chat window or or send us an email, and I'll send you the email link in a moment, put that up on the screen. So let us know if you're interested in the documentation and we'll get that to you as soon as we can. So let's get to it. All right. As we go through today's live lesson, everyone, please remember to use the chat to ask any questions. And one more suggestion. If your screen doesn't look exactly like mine does, don't panic. Different versions of Zoho look slightly different, and your system administrator may have set up your screens a little differently. The functionality that we're discussing today is pretty common to different versions of Zoho, and if you have any questions or concerns about whether today's class works with your Zoho installation, do be sure to drop us either an email or use the chat function. Note also that this is an administrator class. If you don't have administrative privileges on your system, you will have a tough time following along, although you're certainly more than welcome to in order to see what possibilities Zoho offers you in terms of module and field customization. So today, as with all of our classes, we start on the home screen. And from the home screen, we're going to go into the setup page. You'll find the setup under the tools, the crossed tools in the upper right corner. On some versions of Zoho, instead of those being crossed tools, those are actually, that's actually a cog or a gear. But you should find it up in the top right corner. Now here we are in the setup module. I can either, there's a search field there. So if I know that I'm looking for modules, I can start typing modules and it will show me all of the setup options that have the word module in them, or I can find it off to the right. On the right side, underneath the word customization, we have modules and fields. Now, if you're using Zoho out of the box, your screen here may look a bit different. We've been using this as our training platform for a few months now, so we've done quite a lot of customizing. Each of your modules should be listed here. It's sort of like a secret layer for Zoho modules from which they all launch out into the world of CRM superheroism. I'm going to start with a quick tour of the 4 columns you see here at the top. Here we have displayed in tabs. This shows you how you'll see the module from the user interface of your system. For example, up here in the Zoho control bar or on the right in the drop-down menu. The module name is how Zoho itself refers to the module. Often that's the same as the first column, the displayed in tabs as, but it's not always the case. Note any module which has an asterisk beside it here, any module there is called a custom module and then a number after it. So classes, this is a module that we created and it's called custom module 5. And if I scroll through, let's see if there are any other custom modules. There's one. There's test module, that's called custom module. Service contracts is also called custom module. That is the module name that Zoho uses internally. Shared to tells you how many profiles or usernames can see that particular module. We can set Zoho to grant permissions to different users or groups of users on a very granular level. So people in the outside sales team might have access to the leads module, but your business development team might have access to the contacts module, and the two don't necessarily have access to each other's modules. Do all businesses need that level of precision? Definitely not, especially if you're a very small shop. If you're an entrepreneur, you won't need that level of precision. But as you grow, it's nice to know that it's there. We can hover over a profile setting to see which groups of users have access to that module. So in the case of leads, that module is available to the administrator, standard user, the marketing, any users labeled as marketing, salesperson, service user, sales manager, and service manager. And finally, we have the last modified column. Apart from the date itself, that is January 20, here we have, for example, January 17th, 2019. Apart from that, I can hover over it and it will tell me even down to the minute when the last edit was made. And the icon immediately to the left tells you which user made it, which in this case is TMG Live Admin. Now, as we scroll down through this list of modules, a couple of things may become evident. First, any module that's set in black type, such as activities, reports, and analytics, this is actually a collection of modules. In the case of activities, for example, that is actually comprised of tasks, events, and calls. Another thing to notice is that any module name that has an asterisk beside it is a user-created module. When you create your own modules, you'll see an asterisk beside their names in this list. We've created classes. What else have we created down here? There's test modules, service contracts, employees, jobs, and so forth, and equipments down here. In part 2, we're going to look at editing existing modules. As a quick guide, you can edit any module that is set in blue type here. So if it's black, we can't edit the module itself. If it's blue, we can edit the module. Let's see, we also can't edit My Jobs or Social or Desk. We can do some modification of that module, but we can't edit the module itself. Let's see. Now for something like analytics, let's go up to analytics. Here we go. For analytics, we have a limited ability to modify this. For example, we can see that that ellipsis to the right of any object in Zoho says there's more here to see. So when you see an ellipsis, that just means check it out. There's something here to look at. So in the case of analytics, when I hover over that, I see that I can rename the module or I can change module permissions. But that's about all I can do with this module. By contrast, if we hover beside over the ellipsis beside something like, say, products, we can see far more options here. For example, we can change the layout, we can rename the module, we can look at the fields, we can check out the module permissions, and then there are module dependent options down here. For most modules, those first 4 items, you'll find those in almost all modules. The ability to modify the layout, all editable modules will give you the ability to modify the layouts, rename the module, look at the fields, and look at module permissions. There we go, layout, rename, fields, permissions. And here, layout, rename, fields, permissions. So I think it's time to create a quick module here. In our class tomorrow morning, I believe, labeled 202, Module and Field Customization Part 2, we go into more detail on how to customize and create modules, including pick lists and cross-mapping information. For now, I'm going to demonstrate how easily and quickly we can create a new module. So let's go to modules and fields. That's where I want to be. I'm up at the top of that window. And I've got a button there called New Module. I'm going to click that. And I've got a lot of options here to work with. So I'm going to start by giving this module a name. I'm going to prepend my initials on it so my fellow trainers know that it's a module I've created. Now Zoho actually very cleverly gives us 2 options here. There's the plural form of the module name and the singular form of the module name. This is so that when Zoho is referring to the module, it actually knows how to refer to a single item or a group or more than one of that item. So I'm going to call this Tech Library item. Actually, I said I was going to prepend that with my initials, so let's do that. Zoho automatically starts off the plural form. That's the singular form is items, so the plural form would be Tech Library items. So it's one item or several items. There we go. Now, what you might notice here is that MF Tech Library item is there, MF Tech Library item is there, it's also there, it's there. So Zoho has automatically inserted it in lots of areas, in the main area, in the main part of the screen. In one of my businesses, actually, in all of my businesses, I have to deal with a pretty wide range of technology items. And for example, I might work with a lot of different documents and information assets. I might have an organization where I have to deal with using a lot of equipment in my business, and it's nice to know whether or not I'm dealing with a particular piece of equipment in the context of a given project, or maybe I've got a library of assets or a collection of assets, and I want to make those available to other users. So that's what we're going to look at creating here. If you're thinking about these examples and you're starting to wonder whether this sounds more like an ERP than a CRM, you're right. We'll do more of this tomorrow, but for now, here's a quick view of the information and the layout that Zoho provides. There's an image that we can use here that is for the this particular module. So the image is enabled for this module. I can also disable an image to be associated with this module. Off here on the left, I have 23 different fields and controls. Now here's a cool feature. Actually, let's scroll down here. I also have a list of unused fields, and I can have, Zoho tells me that I can have a maximum of 310 fields. Now, in fact, I can arguably have more fields than that by using subforms. We're going to get into that tomorrow. Now, Zoho is going to call this, Zoho starts us with a standard layout. I can have different layouts. But let's go to module permissions. When you start to experiment with modules, you'll probably want to keep the module private only to yourself. That gives you the freedom to play with layouts and other aspects of information design. You can work on that by yourself, and nobody has to watch as you struggle with the inevitable design decisions until you're ready to unleash your creation on your colleagues. So I can set who has access to this according to the roles. So I've got the standard user, the marketing user, salesperson, product management users, service users and sales managers, and service managers. So I can specify who has access to the module. I'll hit cancel there for now. Of course, I can rename the module as well. Oh, sorry, that's the layout name. Sorry, I'm renaming the layout. All right. When it's time to share this module with your colleagues, and you want to offer permissions, what you'll be able to do is you'll be able to set these. We're going to deal with these a little bit later today. These are actually tab groups, but we can assign users to different tab groups, which is really cool. Right now, I'm going to just leave the module as it is, and I'm going to save it. Zoho asks me for permissions, and I confirm that. And Zoho then gives me a green alert saying that I'm good to go. What Zoho may do is Zoho may return me to here. Zoho may return me to here, at which point I have to scroll through the list, and I can go to Tech Library Items. When I click on that, it does not look like my layout anymore. It doesn't look like where I just was. The reason is there's now an intermediary screen that shows me 6 different options. Now when I click on Standard, I'm back into my layout area. I'm back into where I was working on creating this form, but what I'm going to do is I'm going to go through this area first before we get back into the form itself, into the module. So here's my module. I have 6 tabs up at the top here where I can edit different aspects of my new module. I have the layouts, I have layout rules, validation rules, fields, links and buttons, and the summary. And of course, I've got a help button there, which is useful. For layouts, this gives me options here. I can create multiple layouts for any one module. This is like having different views of the same information for different purposes, or maybe different users are able to see different parts of the data in a record depending on what kinds of users they are. So maybe there's one layout for people who can see basic information about the equipment that I'm putting into my tech library, and then there's an expanded array of information for people who own the equipment or who have to maintain this. Simple example. If your hardware has a hard reset feature, you might document that in your layout for service personnel while concealing that information from casual end users. Most of the equipment that you have probably has a service manual. Most of the technical equipment you have probably has a service manual for it somewhere, but usually that's kept out of the hands of non-service personnel. Similarly, end users don't need to see service records for any piece of equipment, but your maintenance personnel almost certainly do need access to that information. I once worked in an organization where we didn't have a system like that, and we had a lot of anecdotal information about what equipment was reliable and what equipment was not, but we didn't have any metrics that we could point to. When we started to implement a records-based maintenance system where we tagged each asset, it gave us the ability to go to our administrators, and in fact, even internally within our department, we could look at what equipment was the most reliable, what was the least reliable, and it allowed us to make a better management decisions. Let's see. Another reason that you might want to use different layouts is that you may want to test a new layout without necessarily unleashing it on everybody. So you may want to test it, and then you may want to have a limited number of colleagues test it, and finally release it to your population at large. I can create a new layout here. And now I'm asked to give this layout a name. I'll say MF test layout 1. Once again, I'm going to save that. Zoho asks me to confirm permissions. I'll do that. And now, if we go back one level, here's my new layout. There's a standard layout and the test layout. And right now, these are both enabled. So this green button off on the right here allows me to activate or deactivate a layout. Let's go back up to the top here, these 6 tabs all the way across. Layout rules. This is something that we can deal with tomorrow. Our advanced customization class also deals with rules, layout rules in depth. If you're already familiar with workflows in Zoho, layout rules function in a similar manner. The same is true of validation rules. The validation rules allow you to verify the integrity of your workflow. So maybe somebody needs to sign off on some aspect of your record before some next step can be taken. We cover this again in our advanced customization class. The Fields tab gives you access to the field listing and field permissions. Just down here, you've got field listing and field permissions. As a designer, as an information designer, I love having this list of fields here, this big global view of the list of fields and their data types, as well as the layouts. So I've got the field label, the data type, whether it's a custom field, and the layouts on which that particular field is visible. This is really handy in terms of designing information systems to have this kind of view. You don't need to see necessarily, when you're working in this view, you don't need to see where these things are laid out on the screen so much as when you're designing the infrastructure of your information system, you need to see what fields are available. The Field Permissions tab allows you to choose the role and see what the permissions are for each field for each role. So the administrator has read and write access to almost everything except the exchange rate. I can't change that. The standard layout has access to everything. Marketing has layout access. Initially, everybody has access to everything, to all fields, but let's say that marketing shouldn't be able to change the creator of the item. So marketing, they can read only. Marketing, let's say, also doesn't need to see at all the time that the record was created, and so on. I can set my permissions for each field, each individual field, according to each of my user groups here. And then I can click Save, and Zoho tells me that the update was successful. I can even in this screen create and edit fields. Well, actually, that takes me to a different screen. Sorry about that. So let's see, we were in fields. Excuse me. And then we have links and buttons. Links and buttons is great fun for designers. It allows you to create buttons that automate certain tasks, and you can create links to other applications. This is really powerful, a lot of fun, and I don't think we get into that today. Finally, we have a summary that is almost entirely read-only information about our new module. This is helpful to have, whether you're simply looking at it or whether you're printing this out. It is handy information to have about your module, your newly created module. Let's go back to our modules page for a moment. We can organize modules in any structure that makes sense to us and reflects some kind of usefulness. The only caution here, let's go to organizing our modules. The only caution here is that when we change the module organization, it gets changed for all users. Most things that we mess around with in Zoho, for example, the color scheme and other aspects of the setup, many of those setup aspects are contingent on, are based on individual users. So when you change your date format, it doesn't necessarily change it for everybody. But in the case of the module organization, this is a global change. So when you change this, everybody gets it changed. So you get to force your vision of the Zoho CRM interface on everybody else in your organization. So there's only one module that we cannot move, and that is Home. And if you look behind, up on the left corner here, there's Home. That will always be there. We're going to get into those three horizontal bars in just a few minutes. So here's our Home module, our home page. That can't be moved, but everything else here can be moved or hidden. So for example, I can uncheck leads, and now we'll see that leads is no longer up at the top left of your screen. This could be a problem because most parts of the business will want to have leads. So let's put it back. Scroll down. Actually, it might be faster to search. There's leads. Zoho tells me that leads is not selected. Now I've selected it. And where has it gone? The answer is it's down here somewhere. Right down there at the end. Boy, it sure would be nice to put it back next to Home, wouldn't it? So let's organize our modules. Scroll, actually, let's search. There's leads. Okay. So leads is there. We've got to scroll through this list. There's leads. I'm going to drag this up, and as I drag it, so we'll scroll this. Sometimes I need to move it around a little bit to keep it scrolling, and I'll put it back up to the right of Home. Now, up and down, left and right. Let's look at the correlation. Let's look at the relationship there. Let me switch myself over here. There we go. All right. The way that Zoho works, top to bottom equals left to right. So if we look at home, leads, contacts, let's see if I can do this. No, it won't show me a cursor. So I can look at home, leads, contacts, accounts, campaigns, activities, and deals. So that's top to bottom. And if you just turn your head to the left, now from left to right, home, leads, contacts, accounts, campaigns, activities, deals. So top to bottom means left to right. Let's go back to that. So here we are, home, leads, contacts, accounts. So let's say that I want accounts or I want activities to come right after accounts. I'll just switch those two. And now up at the top, it should read home, contacts, accounts, activities, and then campaigns. So it should flip those two. I'll save that. And now that's what we've done. All right. When you reorder modules, it's worth noting that reordering also applies to items under the ellipsis. So if I go to the ellipsis and I want my, let's say I want my tech library items up closer to the top of that list, I can still do that. I go to organize modules, tech library items, I would like that, say, right before products. I'll save the list. And now up here under the ellipsis, it's right before products. There's tech library items. Okay, just to reiterate, however, these are global changes. This affects all users, not just you. And speaking from experience, when you go and change the user interface of a system, some users get very, 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 very upset by that. Some users cannot roll with the changes. They're used to seeing things in certain places, and it doesn't matter whether the change is relevant or necessary or sensible or not. Some users will have trouble with that. So use this function with caution. The more users you have out there, the more delicate this is likely to become. Okay, let's get out of there. Now that's modules. We can also organize modules using a function called tab groups. I've mentioned this before. Tab groups allow you to streamline Zoho so that different types of users only see modules that they should be able to access. So that's not only good security practice, this also gives those users the simplest possible interface without the clutter of modules that they don't need to deal with or information that isn't relevant to them. Tab groups go hand in hand with module permissions. For example, I'm going to create a new tab group for lead gen lead acquisition. So I'm going to create a new tab group for lead acquisition, and here I get to determine which modules the lead acquisition tab should have access to. So my leads, they will definitely have access to the leads, or the lead acquisition team definitely needs access to the leads. They should probably have access to activities, possibly campaigns, and definitely I want to have them to have access to analytics. And then I can set permissions for that group. So here's a tab group, and they will have standard permissions. So anybody with standard permissions can access the lead acquisition tab group. I'm going to save that, and now we can see that lead acquisition is a new tab group here. It tells me that this, actually I can click on the pencil and I can review which tabs that group has access to and what the permissions are, who can access that group of tabs. I can also, of course, trash that. So asks me to confirm, and right now I'm going to leave it there for the time being. So when I'm back on my home page, here I'm at my home page. Remember those three horizontal lines to the left? There they are. I have those three horizontal lines, and when I click on that, it shows me that I have either the all tabs, because I'm the administrator, I have access to all of these tabs, or I can say, well, if I'm in the lead, if I have lead acquisition, leads, activities, campaigns, analytics, feeds, and nothing else, because that's what I limited the lead acquisition tab group to. The sales group, let's see if that has the same. Nope, sales group has different access to different tabs here. Likewise, our marketing group has access to a different set of tabs. Let's go back to my lead acquisition group. Yeah, there's only the lead acquisition group only has access to 5 tabs. Let's switch back to all tabs. There I am. As an administrator, of course, I do have access to all tabs. So once again, we get back to that tab group either by going through the 3 horizontal lines there, or by going to, I can manage tab groups that way. Actually, let me go back to the setup and modules and feeds and tab groups. There I am. I'm going to delete the lead acquisition tab group for the time being. There we go. Now Zoho tells me that I can create up to 25 tab groups. So each tab group can contain an unlimited number of tabs or a very limited number of tabs. The tabs visible in a group may differ depending upon a user's profile permissions. So in other words, if a user's profile is, say, marketing, I could give them access to a tab group and they might still not be able to see everything in the tab group because of their limited ability to view certain modules. You could hypothetically have a different tab group in a small company for each employee, but as you'll find that using role-based tab groups generally makes more sense. So next up, we have web tabs. Web tabs are a nifty tool. Let's say that we have an intranet. Let's say that we have a business website and we want to access that website from within the CRM. For example, one of the things I do is I do some teaching on the side at the university level, and what happens is sometimes I would like to have access to a certain part of the faculty intranet from within a different application, rather than switching to a web browser and pulling up the website every time. It would be handy if I just sort of had a quick portal, and a web tab lets me do that. So I'm going to create a new tab. I'm going to call this tab MGL Home, and I'm going to prepend it with my initials. And the source will be a link. And I'll say, let's see. And I'll just use that as an example. I'm going to go back to appending parameters in a moment. I can set who has access to this web tab. Again, there's my list of roles. I'll leave it just the administrator for now. And one last thing up at the top, I can create up to 25 tabs, each with a unique name. Well, in a large organization, that may be helpful. That may be useful. Okay. Let's say that we have, for example, a reference page or a pricing page. Let's create that as a tab. MFMGL home. So where's my tab? Where's my, what's happened? Where is it? Well, let's go to modules. Let's go to organize modules. And there it is, MFMGL home. What I'll do is, for now, I'll just bring it all the way up to the top. I'll put it right after accounts. And we'll take a look at how that works. So there's MFMGL home. What happens when I click on that? The answer is Zoho thinks for a moment, and there's the Marks Group Live home page. So if I had a price list here or a reference page, so for example, if I'm dealing with customers and they say, well, on your pricing page, this is what it says. If that happens more than once or twice for your sales team, you might want to have a web tab up there so they can quickly access that information. Maybe it's too awkward to put a, maybe it's clumsy to put all that information into a, back into Zoho every time. You can simply link to a web page and embed the web page within Zoho. You can see here up at the top, there's my Zoho environment. There's Zoho, and there's my portal within Zoho. Now, don't ask me if it's possible to put the Zoho CRM webpage inside a Zoho CRM webpage. I don't know if that's possible, and this is a shared learning environment, and I'd rather not have it implode on itself. I really don't know if it's possible. I do believe that Google embedding a Google page, embedding a Google search page, will not work with this. That said, it might be a useful idea, and I haven't tested this. It may be a useful idea to embed a Google Doc, say a spreadsheet document or a text document within a Zoho instance. I really don't know if that's possible. If you're interested in that, let me know and I'll test that out for you. Let's see. Another use that does not necessarily endanger reality as we know it might be something like a staff directory. If you've already got that somewhere on a business website, it might be simpler to embed that page as a Zoho tab or as a web tab and use that for reference rather than making sure that everybody is included in some part of your CRM. So let's go back to web tabs. I'll do that here. Modules and fields, web tabs. There may be times, let me click on that. There may be times when you'll need to append a parameter to a URL in order for it to work the way you want to. For example, I have a website where administrative access requires not just the URL, but a code phrase attached to the URL, after which we can log in as a specific username and password. This prevents attackers from accessing the login screen until they've figured out the code that allows them to even see the login screen. It helps to deter script kiddies. In this case, we'll turn on append parameter there. And you can see what might happen. For example, I can add an argument. So here's my preview URL. Login page, or say login code colon talk now. So you can see the preview URL. So maybe instead of a colon, I need to say the login code equals user ID. So now I can embed the user's own ID inside a parameter that goes to a URL. So this way I can even use data from within Zoho to determine where the web page goes. So username So you get a sense for how appending parameters can be very powerful. It is a ridiculously advanced topic. If you think you need it and you can't sort it out, do drop us a line and we'll see what we can do to help you out with that. There's the web tab access again. Like other modules, we can specify who has access to the web tab. I'm going to leave it as administrator just now. In fact, I'm going to delete that because I don't need it today anymore. See, let me go back to web tabs. I edited that. There's the delete button. And now it's gone. So I still have just a few moments of time. I'm going to go back to our newly created Tech Assets module. There's our module. I'm going to scroll down to get to it. No, I'm not. It's gone. I must have deleted it. No, I moved it. There it is. That's right. I moved it when I organized the modules. I moved it to be right after the right after accounts, I believe. No, right after classes. And there it is, right after classes. So I'm going to click on that. I'm going to go to Test Layout 1. I'm going to take a quick look at some of these available fields. Tomorrow we're going to go over how to use all of them, and we're going to create a module for ourselves. I do encourage you to create a junk module, a throwaway module that you can use to experiment with each of these fields, one where only you have access to it, simply because one of the most effective ways that I found of learning is to put myself into an environment where I can't truly follow things up on a large scale by making mistakes. This is what sandboxes are for. And if you create an experimental module, it's a great way to learn how to create and modify modules. Let's do a quick survey of these new field types. Single line. Actually, yeah. So I'm going to create very briefly here. Don't worry if this isn't immediately self-evident as I do it. I'm just going to create a new section here. Module demo area. You can see here that I have options here, whether this is a single column layout, double column layout, and the tab order. We're going to get into this more tomorrow. Right now, I just want to show you the first steps in applying or using, creating a module. Here are the fields. When you want to add something to your layout, you drag a field into part of the layout. So I can drag a single line field here. I can drag it into here, and Zoho will make room for it. I'm going to just put it into my module demo area. I can give the module the field a name. So let's call this serial number. And it'll be a single line. Actually, let's make it serial code because it's not necessarily a number. Serial code. I can have a multi-line field. We'll call this detailed description. That's a multi-line. Now you'll notice that there are ellipses here. And remember what we said about ellipses earlier in today's class? An ellipsis means there is something more to see here. There's something more to do. And in this case, in the case of any of these modules, or sorry, any of these fields, the ellipsis means, hey, there are settings. So I can mark this field as required. And if you've done any amount of work in Zoho, you probably know that when something is required, it has a red underline under the name. I can set permissions for specific fields. So for example, the detailed description, maybe everybody should be able to read it only. The administrator, of course, needs to have read and write access, I think, but you can set access for other people. So up here, if I've set layout permissions, let's say that I have let's say that I want my permissions on this. Oops. I'm going to leave this here for now. Up at the when I was defining this module, when I initially defined the module, I said that only the administrator had access to it. If I gave access to other users or roles, I would have the option here to change those different roles. Let's go back to properties. So the field label is there, and I can change this. This is a multi-line field, so I can have 2,000 characters in it, or I can have 32,000 characters in it. So these are just parameters that I can set. We'll deal more with those tomorrow. And I can show a tooltip that says maybe you can copy the description from the catalog here. I'll set that as static text. Oops, I have a maximum of 32 characters. So I'll just say copy the description from the catalog. Still don't have enough characters. There, now it's happy. And there. And this is what it'll look like. It'll say detailed description, and then here it will have text that says copy description from catalog. Let me click on done there. All right, I still have the warning about the permissions there. That will go away, I suspect, in just a moment. Stay here, save my changes. There. And I can continue adding fields. Email and phone are pretty straightforward. Let's see, the pick list is good. Let's do a pick list. And we'll say borrowed by. All right. Actually, no, you know what? I'm not going to say borrowed by. I'm going to use a different option there. Expertise required. Actually, primary expertise required. And here's a pick list. I can say operating systems. I can say another option might be graphic design. I can add options by clicking on the plus sign in any one of these fields. Programming. Or, wonderful option here, I can add options in bulk. So I can have it predefined choices. Unused values is esoteric, and I'll get into that perhaps tomorrow. Or I can just have multiple options that I'm adding in bulk. I can paste information in here, which is really cool. So if I've got a list from another application, or if I've compiled the list from, say, a spreadsheet or a text document, I can simply add them here. So let's see, what else? Keyboarding. I think these are comma separated. Keyboarding, mousing, nailing large boards together might be another skill that is involved in using this piece of equipment. And there they are. Oh, it's not comma. Okay, so it's not comma separated. I think it's space separated. Let's try that again. Let's go to manual entry. More skills. I think this may be thing 1, thing 2, thing 3. I think this may be space delineated. No, it isn't. Okay, that's not working the way I expected. So let's get rid of that. I can also select a default value here. History tracking is effective. It's nice to be able to display these alphabetically so that no matter which order I enter them in, they'll be displayed alphabetically. Of course, the required field is there. And again, I can show a tooltip. So primary expertise required is sitting there. Once again, we get at that by editing the properties. It is possible also for any field to add that to other layouts. So now this does not cross module boundaries. This is adding it to other layouts within that module. I'll leave that alone for now. Okay. Let's see. Picklists are usually very useful. Sometimes one of the interesting things about picklists, I'll mention this as a important concept here. This goes for validation as well. Sometimes, for example, in a pick list, I've seen people or organizations which want to know where I've worked or where I went to school. And that's fine, unless your pick list doesn't have the information that is applicable to me. So if I've worked in places that aren't in the US and your pick list is a required field that only gives me the 50 states within the US, I've got a problem now. So you really do have to, or for a phone number, this is an important concept for validation. Let's say we go for a number field. Number, and if I mark that as required, and I say set permission, sorry, edit properties. If I say it's required, and the maximum digits allowed is 10, or 9, I guess. Can I set 10? I can't set 10. So let's cancel that. Let's go for phone. Let's click on that. Edit properties. Let's say that I believe that, let's say that we want to be careful here. We'll say we'll only allow 10 characters, or let's say we want to have the dashes between parts of the phone number. So we'll call that 12 characters right there. And so I am only going to allow 12 characters in my phone number, and I'm going to make it a required thing. And now what I've done is I've proven to be dreadfully problematical if I want to enter international information. Because there are phone numbers elsewhere in the world that when you include the country code will be well over 12 characters. So when you deal with validation and when you deal with pick lists, you have to provide enough flexibility in your system to handle the maximum plausible range of answers. Multi-select field. A multi-select field allows you to select multiple items from a list. Date and time fields are fairly straightforward and self-explanatory. Auto-numbering. Auto-numbering is really cool. Auto-numbering allows you to, is great for things like assigning case numbers, invoices, sales orders, purchase orders, employee numbers, but there's a limit to the number of auto numbers that you can have in any layout. Currency, decimal, percent, and long integer, pretty straightforward. Currency is notable in that you can't enter a comma to delineate thousands, millions, and so on. I have to admit, I don't know how well Zoho works in countries where a comma is used instead of a decimal point. There are places where the comma is used to show the difference between integers and fractions. checkbox is a single yes/no value. If you need more than one value selected, use the multi-select tool that we mentioned earlier. The URL allows the user to type in a URL. A lookup is nifty because it allows you to draw information from one table into the current table. This is like doing a lookup in a spreadsheet or in a relational database. Formula makes it possible for users to specify a calculation that Zoho should carry out based on user input. We'll look at that tomorrow, where we have the cost to rent a piece of equipment, the number of days that it is rented, and we can use a formula to calculate what the cost should be. User is important when you're connecting your record to a specific user. An example of this is when we created a lead or a contact or a deal, and we assign that record to a specific user. So, who is responsible? There are my properties. So, that'll pull from the users within Zoho. File upload is our next field type. This allows your user to upload files to Zoho documents. May include things like contracts, manuals, or reference images. Multi-select tool here is like a cross between a multi-select field and a lookup field for looking up multiple items of information from elsewhere in our Zoho CRM. And finally, the subform. The subform is for creating a form within a form. It allows you to add even more fields to your Zoho installation. That's a really quick look at the new fields. There's just one more thing to show you, a cog in the upper right corner of our field area, right there, that cog. Zoho is asking me here whether I'd like to see my layout either as a single column or two-column design, and whether my tabs should go left to right or top to bottom. Tab order is particularly important to your power users who are going to be using the tab key to get around instead of picking up the mouse and clicking into each field. That is our introduction to modules, customizing modules and fields. Let's go here. There we go. What have I done here? Let's go there. So here's what we looked at today. We looked at accessing module and field customization options. We looked at creating custom modules and setting permissions on those. We looked at organizing our modules, creating web tabs and tab groups. We looked at creating the layout for a module, and we took a very quick look at sections within a module. So you can have multiple sections in our module. I did that when I created the demo area as a separate part of the module. So, does anybody have any questions about what you see today? Again, please use the on-screen chat. I will be monitoring that for a few minutes to make sure there are to see if there are any questions that I can answer for anybody today. So I'll wait here for a few minutes, see if any questions come in. You can also email your questions to support@marksgrouplive.com. It'll be down there on your screen. So I'll hang around for a few minutes, see if anything comes in, and I'll be back to you in a few minutes. All right. I don't see any questions that have come in on the chat and or email, so I'm going to thank everyone for joining us today. Please check out the calendar section of the marksgrouplive.com website to see upcoming trainings and what we will be going over. If you have any suggestions for other classes or how to adjust this topic to make it more useful to you, please do email us at support@marksgrouplive.com. If I didn't get to your question during the chat session today, my apologies. Email us again at that email, support@marksgrouplive.com. Message us in the chat window of the marksgrouplive.com website, and we'll answer it that way. Thank you again for attending, and we'll see you next time.